Hello everyone, welcome back to another Project Gladiator weekly overlook. Today I'm going to be covering the weather for July 2nd of 2023, as well as weather for the rest of this week. So currently for today we do have an enhanced risk set up for pretty much kind of the same area, just a little bit east that we were seeing yesterday. This is mostly going to be isolated towards Kentucky and the northern Tennessee region, as well as another pretty large slight risk that goes off into the Atlantic Ocean across much of the eastern coast through Virginia and northern North Carolina, across much of the eastern United States, and then a pretty large marginal threat around that doesn't go into Canada like last time, but still does cover a large portion of the eastern United States. We also do have another marginal threat that's for the northern border of the United States, northern North Dakota and northern Minnesota. This I probably won't cover too much in today's forecast, if not at all. We do have another slight risk for parts of New Mexico and Oklahoma and the Texas Panhandle, with a pretty large marginal threat around that extends all the way into Nebraska, across eastern Colorado and western Kansas, into eastern New Mexico and the Texas Panhandle. Our threats for this do include the possibility of one or two tornadoes today, with the storms that are going to be associated in the enhanced risk area for Kentucky and northern Tennessee. We do have a 30% wind threat with a 15% around that on a 5%. As for the marginal threat up north, we do have a 5% wind threat for that and a 15% wind threat for that slight risk back towards the west, with a 5% around that. As for our hail threats, we do have a 15% for that enhanced risk region with a 5% around that, as well as a 5% for either the slight risk and the marginal threat up north. Taking a look at our pivotal weather models, in the first half of today's forecast, I'll be covering weather for only today, and then in the second half of today's forecast, I'll be covering weather for the rest of this week. So let's take a look at the triggering factors for severe weather development for today. We can see that we still have that shortwave trough that is beginning to weaken over time. That triggered severe weather yesterday. It's still continuing to move through Kentucky and Tennessee and West Virginia across the Ohio Valley to trigger severe weather development there. It is slowly dying, and as it continues eastward, I don't think it's going to propagate for too long at the strength that it is currently. It's definitely going to weaken as it continues towards the Atlantic Ocean, but this is going to trigger severe weather development, as well as trigger the possibility of some elongated photographs and the possibility of some medium to small hail. This is also going to provide ample wind shear for the possibility of one or two tornadoes today. And then you can see that we do have this shortwave trough that is making its way out of Canada. This is going to trigger severe weather development for today in that northern marginal threat region, as well as trigger severe weather development for a good portion of this week as well. So for today, in the marginal threat that's for northern North Dakota and Minnesota, it's going to only catch the first half of that shortwave trough. It's not going to be too strong for today. It's likely going to ramp up by tomorrow, but for today, it's not going to really be all that strong. Mostly just allow for the possibility of some small hail, possibly, and then allow for the possibility of some gusty winds. But then let's take a look at the slight risk that's back towards Texas and New Mexico. There isn't really all that much of a tornado threat with that, because you can see that it doesn't look like there's all that strong mid-level flow or low-level flow that is clearly visible. However, that region is definitely getting the back end of that shortwave trough back towards the Ohio Valley to trigger severe weather development in that slight risk area, as well as maybe a little bit of help from lee troughing in the region as well. So that's mostly what's going to be the triggering factors for down south. Taking a look at the dew points, let's start off with the enhanced risk region for now. I'll probably go into the slight risk region later on in today's forecast before I cover weather for the rest of this week, but let's focus on the enhanced risk for now back towards the Ohio Valley. You can see that we have some fairly strong dew points just like yesterday. We have some extremely strong dew points. This is almost tropical levels of dew points just like yesterday. It's mostly going to be in the mid 70s to low 70s, but maybe some upper 70s in some isolated regions. But overall, this is going to trigger the possibility of some extremely strong instability depending on our lapse rates, as well as help prolong our severe weather development and help keep it going for possibly into tomorrow as well, into West Virginia, and North Carolina. However, depending on our lapse rates, we could again see the possibility of some strong instability with this extremely strong moisture. This extremely strong moisture is expected to persist ahead of the line today that develops in Kentucky and move through extremely strong moisture and help keep it going as it continues through much of today. Taking a look at our lapse rates, we don't have all that strong lapse rates like we were seeing yesterday. However, these lapse rates are definitely going to be fairly strong. They're mostly in the moderates to low to mid moderates, with lapse rates in the 6s to 7s in some regions, especially with those extremely strong dew points. With lapse rates like this and dew points that were extremely strong, we could definitely see the possibility of some cave values that do reach the 3,000s to upper 3,000s and possibly the low 4,000s in some regions. Taking a look at our instability, you can see that we do get pretty much exactly that. We get some fairly strong instability. You can see where storms initially develop in towards the northern Dixie states. There is currently a severe weather watch for that region in particular, as well as a mesoscale discussion for western Kentucky regarding a watch that could be possible regarding the areas of severe weather development. So mostly severe weather development could be seen towards the northern Dixie states and southern Tennessee, right around this region, as well as a large squall line to possibly a derecho. Probably not. I don't think winds are going to get up to as strong as they were yesterday, but they could definitely be pretty strong. So mostly just going to be the possibility of a squall line, not really a derecho today. But the main regions that we could see severe weather development again could be right here, as well as the possibility of right here. So it's kind of going to go around the majority of Tennessee, but it could definitely affect the northern and southern reaches of Tennessee. However, because of how strong this instability is, after severe weather development does develop, it is expected to develop into a little bit of a cluster further down south and a squall line further up north. And with extremely strong instability ahead of that line, it does decrease over time to more of the moderates, the mid to upper moderates, and the low 3,000s. Not really all that much the 4,000s anymore. That's going to be mostly in Tennessee, where severe weather development is unlikely to hit, but could be possible to hit. However, with instability like this, as it continues eastward, storms are definitely going to be aided by the continuing instability and help prolong the severe weather development likely into tomorrow as it moves through West Virginia, and North Carolina. Taking a look at our bulk shear here, we can take a look at the combination of our speed shear, which will affect our hill threat mostly, and then our directional shear, which will affect our tornado threat mostly. So I will go into more detail on our tornado threat with the storm relative helicity and take a look at more of the directional shear after the bulk shear in particular. But with that shortwave trough, we could definitely see some elongated photographs to allow for the possibility of some large hail, not large, more medium size to small. Definitely not going to get up to the large sizes because of overall how weak the shear is. However, we could definitely see some damaging hail to maybe your roof or your car. But taking a look at our shear, this is relatively weak shear ahead of this line. You can see the line right here. All this shear behind it is in its wake. You can see that we have some relatively weak shear ahead of that line. So some embedded tornadoes could be possible. However, it does look like it's going to be a little bit unlikely, and the tornado threat is likely going to be back here when storms initially develop and begin to develop into a line with all that strong shear ahead of it, which will affect our tornado potential, mostly keeping it isolated towards the western parts of northern Tennessee and Kentucky. Taking a look at our storm relative helicity index, or the directional shear, which is going to aid in our tornadic development, and the type of shear that is mostly needed for tornadoes is directional shear, and this is taking a look at mostly the directional shear in the atmosphere apart from bulk shear, which takes a look at both directional shear and speed shear combined. So it's better to break it down into the respective parts so we can see the possibility between hail and tornadoes regarding shear. So taking a look at our storm relative helicity index, you can see around the time I did expect our tornado potential to be the strongest, where storms initially develop right around here and develop into a line. Our storm relative helicity index, where we have the strongest potential for tornadoes, is ahead of that line, but it does weaken over time as that storm line does propagate eastward. So our tornado potential is mostly going to be isolated towards the further west reaches of the Kentucky to northern Tennessee region, but we do see that we do have some overall pretty weak energy left in the atmosphere to allow for the possibility of some embedded tornadoes. However, it does look like the strongest possibility for embedded tornadoes is going to be further out west. Taking a look at our dew points, now we're going to be taking a look at the slight risk that's further out west. You can see that we do have some fairly strong dew points that are going to mostly lead to the possibility of some more moderate cape, as dew points are not really as strong as further out east. However, we could definitely see some fairly strong instability regarding this dew points, depending on our lapse rates again, but definitely with dew points like this, we don't see a strong, prominent dry line develop. However, it does look like storms are expected to develop on the dry to moist boundary. So around this line, sort of storms are expected to develop along that boundary line between more dry air and more moist air, and continue eastward into more of the moist and unstable air. However, again, with instability like this, we are expecting to see more moderate cape compared to further out east. Taking a look at our lapse rates, we can see that we usually do get some fairly strong lapse rates along the dry boundary, and it does look like we still have some pretty strong lapse rates in that region. We have some lapse rates that are in the mid to upper 8s and possibly the low 9s in some regions, which is definitely going to allow for the possibility of maybe some upper moderate cape values depending on our dew points. But with the dew points that I showed you, I definitely think that upper moderate cape values could be possible. Taking a look at our instability given our dew points and our lapse rates, we can see that we do have some fairly moderate instability. It's not getting up to the crazy 3000s, upper 3000s, and low 4000s like in the Ohio Valley. They are much more subtle, and in the more moderate levels, in the 1000s to possibly the 2000s range. Again, with the possibility of some slightly elongated photographs, we could see the possibility of some small hail, as well as the possibility of some medium-sized hail in some isolated regions, as well as the possibility of some strong damaging gusts. However, I think the possibility of strong wind gusts is going to be the main threat for today outside of our hail and tornado potential. Taking a look at our wind shear, I'm not too worried about the storm relative helicity index or directional shear because we do not have all that much of a tornado potential, but we can look at our wind shear to see how it might affect our hail potential. And getting to right around storm development time, you can see that we do have some fairly weak wind shear. I think the reason that this wind shear is so weak because it's not really in the shortwave trough region. However, with the overall weak mid-level flow, we definitely see some small to maybe some small medium-sized hail with the mid-level flow that we saw, and maybe a little bit of a slightly elongated hodograph to allow for the possibility of, again, small to maybe some small medium-sized hail. Again, I don't think our hail potential is going to be too strong. It's mostly going to be the threat for damaging winds. However, we could definitely see the possibility of some small hail with this system in particular because of how overall weak wind shear is, and how overall weak the mid-level flow is. Some hodographs could be slightly elongated to affect our hail potential. Taking a look at our pivotal weather models for the rest of this week, now that I've covered weather for today, let's take a look at where we could see the possibility of some strong severe weather for the rest of this week, and what might be the main threats for the rest of this week as well. At the beginning of today's forecast, I did mention the shortwave trough that is making its way out of Canada. It's moving southeast to a more eastward direction. However, as it moves eastward and southeastward, it is going to trigger severe weather development from Monday into Thursday across the northwestern states, parts of Montana, North Dakota, Wyoming, and South Dakota. That's going to be the main region for severe weather development regarding the shortwave trough. Because of how overall weak moisture is in this region, instability is going to be very, very limited. Just like I covered in the last weekly overlook, again, moisture is going to be very limited, so it's likely going to limit our severe potential a lot. Because of how strong this mid-level flow, but how weak the instability is going to most likely be, we may not see the possibility of tornadoes regarding the first half of this week. However, as it moves south, it is expected to get as far south as Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, and South Dakota, maybe parts of Kansas as well. This is going to trigger the possibility of tornadoes from Thursday into Sunday with strong mid-level flow, as well as the possibility of some elongated hodographs and some large hail and strong damaging wind gusts. This is moving into a region where dew points and instability is likely going to be much stronger. Because it's moving into a region where those parameters are going to be much stronger, we are going to see the possibility of some tornadoes depending on our wind shear for this week. After Thursday, in the wake of that shortwave trough, we do have a pretty active and strong subtropical jet coming out of the Pacific Ocean, which is likely going to be triggering severe weather development across Colorado and the Central Plains for the rest of this week, as I think storms are expected to move from Colorado and into the rest of the Central Plains. With a relatively strong mid-level flow, it's more moderate to the weaker end. We could definitely see the possibility of a 2% tornado threat, maybe the possibility of a 5% tornado threat, but definitely the possibility of a 2% tornado threat this week after Thursday into Sunday. And then with this strong subtropical jet, we could definitely see the possibility of some large hail with elongated photographs and the possibility of some strong damaging outflow gusts. Taking a look at our dew points for the rest of this week, let's look at where the shortwave trough is going to be moving through from Sunday to Thursday. You can see that we do have some relatively weak dew points across the regions where we're going to be expecting severe weather development the most with that shortwave trough in the first half of this week. Again, with this fairly weak dew points, we could see mostly some moderate Cape values, definitely not going to get up into the crazy 2,500s. It's mostly going to stay in the 1,000s, possibly the triple digits, maybe the weak 2,000s on some days. However, it's not going to get up into the 3,000s or 4,000s at all. And then let's take a look at from Thursday to Sunday, where we could see the possibility of a few tornadoes. We do have some fairly strong dew points regarding Thursday and Sunday with that subtropical jet and the rest of that shortwave trough. We definitely again see the possibility of more strong severe weather development from Thursday to Sunday, again in stronger instability. Taking a look at our lapse rates, let's start off with the region where we could see the possibility of severe weather development in the first half of this week from Sunday to Thursday associated with that shortwave trough. You can see that we do have some relatively strong lapse rates on some days. However, they do mostly stay in the moderates, and then on some days it is pretty weak overall. So we definitely see the possibility of some moderate, stronger moderate Cape on some days. However, it is looking like it's mostly going to be in the triple digits to weak 1,000s range. It's probably not going to get up to the 2,500s. It could on some days, but most likely not going to. It's definitely not going to get up into the 3,000s or 4,000s with lapse rates like this and dew points like that. So let's take a look at Colorado from Thursday to Sunday. You can see after that shortwave trough moves through the region, we do have some fairly strong lapse rates, as we usually do in that region, which is definitely going to allow for the possibility of maybe some upper moderates and maybe some weak 3,000s in some regions with the dew points that we have, but it does look like it's going to stay mostly in the upper moderates range. Taking a look at our instability, let's start off with the days where we could see the possibility of some overall weaker severe weather development from Sunday to Thursday. You can see around the Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming region, wherever we're going to see the possibility of severe weather development first. We do have some overall relatively weak Cape values. Cape values are most likely going to stay in the triple digits to possibly the low 1,000s range, maybe the mid 1,000s range as well. However, it does not look like it's going to get up to the 2,000s range at all. It looks like it's mostly going to stay in the triple digits to 1,000s range. With this, it's going to severely limit our severe potential a ton. With Cape values like this, we're likely going to see the possibility of a few marginal threats from Sunday to Thursday. However, we could see a slight risk. However, it doesn't look all that likely with Cape values like that. But now let's take a look at Cape values from Thursday to Sunday and possibly into next week as well in Colorado and the Central Plains. You can see that we do have some fairly strong instability, more so compared to the Montana, North Dakota, Wyoming, and South Dakota threats. We do have more moderate to upper moderate, maybe the 2,000s range to upper 1,000s range as well. What this instability is going to do with wind shear, we could possibly see the possibility of a 2% to maybe a small 5% tornado threat, depending on our wind shear on some days. And then as well as with elongated photographs and wind shear, we could definitely see the possibility of maybe some large hail on some days and the possibility of some strong damaging outflow gusts. Taking a look at our wind shear, let's start off with the Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming regions for now from Sunday into Thursday. You can see that we do have some really strong wind shear. However, it is likely not going to allow for the possibility of any tornado threats because of how overall weak our instability is. However, this could allow for the possibility of some elongated photographs, allow for the possibility of maybe some small hail and strong damaging outflow gusts. But then let's look at the possibility of tornadoes with wind shear and the possibility of some large hail regarding the possibility of strong severe weather development in Colorado and the Central Plains. You can see that we do have some fairly strong wind shear that is expected to persist in the region. This wind shear could allow for the possibility of a 5% tornado threat and the possibility of a 2% tornado threat on some days, as well as with the possibility of some large hail and the possibility of some strong damaging outflow gusts. Now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator and join the Discord for any updates on Project Gladiator. And hopefully I will see you guys tomorrow with another daily forecast.